Don't shoot. Okay. He needs help. Now, on the ground. Now. He needs help. Don't shoot. Okay. He shot Harry. I thought he was going to shoot me too. Frame up on his face. He's got dark hair. According to Sarah, our gunman had long blonde hair. Oh, you gotta go with Sarah. She's a Chinese girl. That's not our guy. Let him go. Now loose. That's not our guy. Let's go. Let's go. The gunman could have shot that guy, but he didn't. Why not? His lucky day. Who knows? Oh, it's gotta be more than that. It's gotta be something else. Come here. Shooting began in conference room A, right? Yeah. According to Sarah, 417, the shooter comes in through the side door here. Shoots here, and here. The number fires into this area. Then he goes down the hallway here, past B and C, all the way to conference room D, and then he shoots the place up. Why? Why did he skip those 2 rooms? Maybe nobody was in them. No, I checked. All 4 rooms at the time of the shooting were filled. I mean, that's what a spree killer wants, right? Is a high body count. So why not shoot up the casino, for God's sake, or at least the pool area? You're right. He's upstairs where the rooms are. Doors are locked, no crowds, and no way out. No, this guy is targeting these areas, right? You're saying he's looking for specific people. This is not a random killing spree. Our gunman has a hit list. Just a lot of
Ito sa Las Vegas ba? Nasa hotel. Kasi na to, ikaon na mo ayan.
Crocodile Dundee. Masih Crocodile Dundee. Sobrang kon ba? Abi niya.
Kuan ba to na video ba to yang kuan? Ikaon siya sa crocodile.
Abi niya kuan ba? Pero ito.
At Sky, we do our best to comply with the broadcasting codes of practice. But if you think we've breached the standard, you can send us a formal complaint. You need to mention the name of your request, the date and time of the issue, and the standard you think has been breached within 20 working days of the broadcast. Send your letter to this address or go to sky.co.nz/complaints. We'll review the complaint and get back to you once a decision has been made.
Now add oregano, pepper, egg, separated, flour, olive oil, parmesan.
Take the easy road to a tasty dinner with Helen's deliciously crafted meatballs range. Italiano, smoky bacon cheeseburger, and great balls of fire. Thank heavens for Helen's.
Hey, you are going to name it 2028. Edward.
Yeah. And we see you making plans for 21, 22, and the rest of April.
But guess what? We got plans too, because we're overriding and we're ready to play. Watch out.
Because you know what this is? It's metaphorical freedom. I'm going back home to see my mom.
Don't forget, see. I'm looking in the table. Ready, every day all year long. Hey, Colin, you're gone.
Hey, Kevin, check this out.
We gotta get unity.
Yeah. Over 200 years of craftsmanship have gone into these few thousand bottles for your maximum enjoyment. More than it.
Lincoln. Dengan kikon sa ko. Kami nag-ansa ka. Chuy.
Gano'n kada yung Wanda?
Oo.
Wala kang holiday? Tagal mo na silang holiday.
Ano po? Dengan trabaho.
Wala pa niya. Mahawa na traffic. Wala niya po.
Sige.
Mahawa na.
We're here so the victim can be heard. Each life.
That's HD.
In the wild, it's survival of the smartest. Join Chris Garden as he uncovers the trickiest strategies of the animal kingdom.
Inside the Mars, nature's savviest species.
Find out who's the smartest of them all.
I've never failed to be impressed by nature's sheer ingenuity.
The New Zealand premiere Animal Einsteins, Sundays 8:30 on BBC Earth.
Tulog ko ba? Kailangan. Ano siya naman? Ay, isa ba? Ano ba nagsisa yung tsara nila?
Choose mom. Used C-section start. That's Morgan's friend. What you trying to say? Over CPR.
Hindi ka?
Size of a 223. Consistent with an AR-15. Largest federal assault. Firing 700 rounds. Belongs in a war zone. Not other streets. The killer wanted to make sure that he hit his friends. Didn't care who else he shot. He wasn't aware that he was going after specific people. Some of these victims most likely collateral, but the rest were on his hit list. I just need to figure out what they had in common, so maybe we can figure out who he's going after next.
So, wala lugar na nakita sa suko lugar ka na, yan na. Sira gimana kita. Jangan nih gana. Pasuan.
Heard you found Paul Carson's van. Yeah, abandoned in an alley behind a strip joint off of Fremont Street. That part of town nobody's quick to call the cops. Well, killer smarts, just like he thought he'd conceal a person's ID by turning his body into goop. Yeah, he didn't want anything to get in the way of his shooting up the hotel there. His wife was missing 3 days ago. We know that Carson went to work, but I pulled hotel surveillance, and you can clearly see his van parked in his usual spot. But then I noticed something. Check out this guy in the hoodie. You can't see his face, and it looks like he's walking past the van, yet he never exits frame. So he broke into the back of the van, and then waited for Carson to get off work. He forced him to drive to the abandoned construction site, shot him, dumped his body into the barrel, poured muriatic acid on him, and dissolved the body. And the only image we have of this guy, you can't make out the face. No, but you might have his DNA. I found this used tissue underneath the back seat, according to Carson's wife. Carson was the only one who used the van. I suppose I could have come from the shooter's pocket. Have Henry run that, all right? Tell him to put it in front of the because I witnessed
Didn't start with Mark or someone. You just punch in the time frame, and that's the only footage the cameras. Hopefully, one of the cameras caught the shooter.
You heard from Virginia?
No, she's still stuck in the elevator.
Oh, I'm sure they'll get them out soon.
That's the door that the shooter came in.
Damn, he's blocked behind a pillar. All right, let me try another clip. It's been terrifying.
Yeah, was.
You know, you don't have to be here for this. I can take care of it.
I want to be here.
You might heard about what happened. I'm worried. I'm just glad you're okay.
Can we scroll forward frame by frame? I think I might get something. That's him.
Okay, let me zoom in. I'll isolate his face. Run it through facial recognition. Morgan got an ID. Jeff Lasky, 26-year-old out of Phoenix, had warrant, got himself. See if we can try and push that. That's just going to tell us he's still in the hotel. Tap into his Wi-Fi and track down the Bluetooth. the bomb dogs in there and sweep the hotel. Make sure this guy did not leave us any surprises. Let's get Finn out of the elevator. And give engineering a
You're gonna get us out of here. Mark, can you hear me? I'm coming to get you right now.
Sorry.
What?
Yeah. Sure. Later.
It's more of a YouTube kind of girl. I saw them in my room. Went to a YouTube concert. That's amazing. I was there on a Euro pass and I was hanging in a bar in Dublin, and all of a sudden you two walked right in and we started. No. Mark, come on, you can do it. Breathe. Breathe.
This is a video.
Huh?
This is a video. Either
We just crashed. I mean, that was-
matay or nalain or
He makes PD do a search of Lasky's house. Apparently he was obsessed with the man who murdered his wife and daughter 3 months ago. Luke Reeser. Police. He raped them before he killed them, right? That was Lasky's family. That's enough to put anybody over the edge. Yeah, but Reeser was caught. He's awaiting trial. Why would Lasky go on a rampage today? Because Reeser should have been behind bars a long time ago. He raped and murdered a teenage girl back in 2012 in Texas. Set the place on fire in order to cover his tracks. The evidence wasn't strong enough to convict. So they used Phoenix, worked for Lasky's family. You know, Morgan, 3 of the CSIs have been killed today for crime out of Dallas. Lasky must have blamed them for putting Mr. back on the street. They're not the only ones he was gunning for. He testified for the defense. Of course, I'll talk to the press. We need to give WNE the exclusive, though. No, I can take care of that. He was after you. I'll call you back. The gunman, Jeff Lasky, ring a bell? What about Luke Reeser? You helped put that son of a bitch back on the street, and he went on to murder Lasky's family. If I remember correctly, the prosecution didn't have that much evidence against Reeser, and what they did have was mishandled. No. I talked to that in Dallas. A DNA analyst transposed 2 numbers on a piece of paper. It's a simple mistake, Jake. Someone in the lab should have caught it. A guilty man went free because of a typo. It was sloppy work. Who knows what the mistakes that lab made? You used to care about the truth. Come on, Sarah. We're not on the same side anymore. It's my job to poke the holes in the science and put on a show for the jury, right? Luke Reeser raped and killed Jeff Lasky's wife and 5-year-old daughter, slit their throats, and then dumped their bodies in the trash. That's why Lasky went on this rampage. 11 people are dead because of you. I didn't put the gun in Lasky's hand. No, you kind of did. Lasky sent you emails. He sent you threats over a month ago. You didn't report it. I get threats all the time. Newsflash, Sarah. I'm a woman with strong opinions. Some people just don't like me. None of this would have happened if you had just gone to the police, Jane. Why don't you put that in the press conference?
Can you post it?
Take a look at this. SWAT found this man's body in the doorway of his room on the 15th floor. Looks like he was shot when he opened the door. Hotel security said it happened at 4:17.
That's when the shooting started. Conference room A.
Lasky couldn't have been 2 places at once. I think there had to be a second shooter.
You may be right. Got DNA off of that used tissue I found in the security guard's van. Jeff Lasky didn't kill him. But DNA did come back to match to this guy, Cliff Ballard.
I've seen him before. Yeah, this is the guy that SWAT found standing over the body in the hallway. Unarmed and acting scared like he was just another hotel guest.
Well, that's why Sarah only saw one shooter. Because Lasky was shooting up the conference rooms while Ballard was shooting people upstairs.
Yeah, well, SWAT let this guy go.
Asa na email mo? Di ko mo may sakwa o sa imo?
Ako.
Ha?
Ako. Share na ba isa?
Nagnuwa nga rin siya ba? Mo lagi.
Invention shapes our modern world, sparks our imaginations, and drives us to reach for more. Take a deeper look as we deconstruct the most complex engineering universe and incredible machines. Mechagoon Sundays, Sunday at 7:30 on National Geographic. Arm yourself with Healthy Heroes at your local Nutrient and Life Pharmacy. Get 24-hour immune support with this high price on Nutrilite Is to See. Support your immune system with natural high-strength Virolex capsules. Join Health with Go Healthy Fish Oil capsules, only $7.99. And start protecting yourself and those around you by getting your flu vaccination. Don't forget to ask for your free Lipo Sachet sample pack. Only at Nutrient and Life Pharmacy. Proudly New Zealand owned and operated. There's no way that way. I'm 100% New Zealand beef. Anything else I can help you with?
Here's a spice model.
Potatoes, spice. What about the filet of fish?
You see where we usual nipples?
Trees grow, we pick them, you eat them.
Okay, but what?
Take that. Super fast, please.
Can I just try one?
This is a Smile Direct Club aligner. It's how Smile Direct Club safely and gently straightens your teeth. And you'll get a smile you love 3 times sooner than braces. Get started for free at smiledirectclub.co.nz.
Get off road. Get on board. Get on track. That's on. Onto this, onto that. Drive on and on, off the beaten track. Off-road, on-road, off-road. Drive on any road. Whether you're a renter, owner, beginner, or DIY winner, rolling in cash, tighter than a stuck window check. Need nails, snares a tower of nails, or a heater to make your outdoors sweet. We've got a range of low prices and local advices to do whatever your job is. Super nice there. Anyways, I'm a builder, not a cult, not that you know it, so come on in, we'll show you how to do it. Yeah, good range, low price, local advice, nice. Pleasure to be here. Yes, here I am. The steel streets of Asia, 1952. Tropical heat, impossible to brew. Yes, here I am. Bold and refreshing, like cage your tiger. Wednesday, Sky School 3. I would never thought it could have happened in Sutherland Springs, but it did.
It's just chaos. Just straight lying. I left it on her bed. She never came back.
Your story just brings back so much.
Saturday, 30 on ID.
SWAT's been searching the hotel outside of Ballard. Please tell me you found something.
Actually, Ballard was a CSI, and he just got out of prison. Served 9 years for felony fraud, falsifying evidence.
Yeah, didn't he work out of the crime lab in Baltimore?
Yeah.
Well, I remember when he was arrested, there was this huge scandal. Every case he worked on was called into question.
Well, maybe he blames his coworkers for turning him in.
No, because then he would have shot up the lab in Baltimore. No. All of Ballard's work would have been audited by a team of forensic experts, right? Criminals from all over the country, selected to evaluate his cases. They're the ones who put him in prison.
Could be his targets. Let me see if I can find out who was on that team.
I went through all of Jeff Lasky's emails, his phone records, his texts, his web history. I can't find any evidence that he's working with Ballard.
All right, so what do we know about the two shooters? Lasky, grieving father, husband, wanted to get even, murder of his family. Ballard's the ex-con, presumably is going after the people who put him in prison.
Two different shooters, two different agendas.
But with one big thing in common. They both hate law enforcement. Now, we've been assuming that the shooters were working together, right? What if they weren't?
They both go on a rampage, same time, same place.
We've been looking for a connection between these guys, and we haven't found one. So maybe their connection is the conference itself. I mean, think about this. Once a year, CSIs and cops from all over the country get together at this conference. Now, if you had a beef with law enforcement, what better place to come than right here?
I found that list of people who served on Ballard's audit.
That guy right there. That's the guy that Ballard was standing over in the hallway. He must have killed him right before SWAT arrived.
Sarah. Oh, she was on that team.
Notify SWAT. I'll call Sarah.
I'm on the 18th floor. I got a text. Cliff Ballard. He's in prison.
I got out in August. Give me the phone.
Alright.
Now the gun.
The text telling me to come up here. It's from you, wasn't it?
I wanted to get you alone.
This woman engaged. She was part of the new team. You killed her, didn't you?
She helped send me to prison. Just like you.
It was not personal. You were just asked to take Cliff to the border.
I was a good criminalist.
I know you were, Cliff. You did a lot of good work over the years.
Rapists and murderers behind bars. They were all guilty. They deserved what they got.
I'm sure they did. But you tampered with the evidence to get the results you wanted.
I didn't have a choice. The detectives come to you. They want a slam dunk. Evidence isn't always like that.
It's a lot of pressure. I've been there many times. Convictions hinge on conclusive evidence, and you don't have enough. I feel like a failure.
I had to do something.
I understand. It's natural you want to help the case along.
You don't understand. If you did, you would help send me away.
Cliff, wait.
Treated me like a criminal. Destroyed my life. You okay? You okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Bullshit na siya.
Hey,
Hey,
Ano na siya
Charlie Gates, that sent me back.
I'm glad I did.
Tanong kung ano yung para
You
sa...
saved my life.
Won't buy me dinner. We'll call it even.
Tim.
So the doctor said that you're going to need some time to recover. And that you cannot fly back to Boston for at least 2 weeks. So I was hoping that maybe we could hang out. You know, when you get back up on your feet.
You mean date?
Yeah, like dinner and a movie and a goodnight kiss.
You know, dating sometimes can turn into a real relationship.
I'm only gonna skip.
Me too.
Kung gusto lang lalaki.
Ha?
Kung gusto lang.
Hydrogen peroxide to clear out the blood. Thank you. We always wear gloves when we go to the crime scene. You know, we're never there when it actually happens. I know. Are you okay? I'm okay. Valerie wanted you dead, and if SWAT hadn't been there, but they were. Bill called. She said they still have that VIP table in town. What do you think?
Gatuyo na nila ilang ipon ng anak, diba?
Binahingi po.
Tequila sounds pretty good.
Ano may iba ng gatuyo ng anak? Siyempre, Jerry Bruckheimer yun. Marimot ba? Jerry Bruckheimer. Gi-record pa, naman na.
Hindi ko nga.
In honor of Earth Day, Joe Biden held a virtual climate summit, which made history as the first digital gathering of 40 world leaders. 40 is a lot. I mean, there are only 3 leaders present at Yalta, and you may not know this, but Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin met via semaphore. Today, Joe Biden made this historic announcement.
The United States sets out on the road to cut the greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade.
That's an ambitious goal that can be met only by sharply cutting back oil, gas, and coal use. That's from the Rough on Santa. Oh, kitty, you've been naughty, but coal's been canceled. So here's the Snyder cut of gas. He's cutting everything now. He's cutting everything. Biden is reversing the previous administration, which pulled out of Paris Accord. Policy czar Gina McCarthy explained the U.S. is back in the game. That game, don't break the ice. Hey, it's time for another Earth fact. At random intervals over the last 4 billion years, the Earth's north and south magnetic poles have flipped. Biden wasn't the only Washington insider trying to save the planet in honor of Earth Day.
I'm sure it's just a routine mission.
Gosh, you did not believe that for a second. Come on. Wait, Jack, a murder?
Nagamitan pa rin yung bait.
Ha?
Ito yung mga
He was not just risking his own life,
Oo.
all of his friends and family.
The amazing machine that changed the world.
Snatch game.
I was absolutely gobsmacked. RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under. New episode Saturday 6 p.m. TVNZ on demand. 8:30 on Tuesday. Hands on buzzers. Start that clock. It's been a bad week for Auckland's Queen Street. What's happened?
Let's fill it street festival.
Use them up.
There were some complaints about the new pedestrian song.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, that's so great. Oh, I love it. It's so easy to use. And fun.
A members' tie with the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club, better known as Wimbledon, and a bronze statue upon which are etched some of his finest career achievements. But among the triumphant pieces of memorabilia is an item that recalls an episode mired in controversy and scandal.
The artifact is 28 inches tall and 12.5 inches wide. It weighs about 12 ounces. It consists of a metal frame and strings. It's a pretty well-known piece of sporting equipment.
This tennis racket took center court in a monumental matchup that defined a generation.
This is a story about determination, skill, and the fight for equality.
It's the early 1970s. In the world of international tennis, an acrimonious conflict is brewing between women and men.
Tennis was a hugely popular sport, and it kept getting bigger as a result of the rise of television. And women were really finally beginning to get attention.
But while male stars are earning big bucks, women make just pennies in comparison.
The prizes were shockingly different. Women tennis players could be paid thousands of dollars less than men. They must have been angry.
One player determined to set things straight is 29-year-old Billie Jean King.
Billie Jean King was hands down at the time one of the best players in the world. She had won Wimbledon, she had won the US Open, she had won multiple Grand Slam events. I think she was the one that felt obligated to do something about it.
One day, she gets the perfect opportunity. In the spring of 1973, she receives a challenge from a 55-year-old retired male player named Bobby Riggs.
Bobby Riggs had once been the best in the world. People knew him for his tennis, but they also knew him because of his personality. He was a total chauvinist.
Riggs is an outspoken opponent of women's equality.
He would say the most ridiculous things. You know, women belong in the kitchen, but they don't belong in the court. He really didn't believe there was a shred of equality between a man and a woman, especially on the tennis court.
King accepts Riggs' offer, but the champion knows that to prove her point beyond doubt, she will have to win.
King realized that Riggs' absurdity actually was an opportunity. There would be a large stage that would allow her to send a message to the greater world, and I think she took it.
As the day of the match draws near, interest in the epic face-off starts to grow.
I think people were interested in this happening because the idea of putting a woman right in the face of a guy and watching them compete felt really powerful to women.
The showdown even earns a unique moniker.
This match ended up getting its own nickname, the Battle of the Sexes.
In preparation, King meticulously studies her opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Riggs, a former champion himself, will be a tough adversary. But then King spies a chink in his armor, his stamina.
I think King felt like she could wear him out through strategically placed shots.
If King can exhaust Riggs, she has a solid chance of winning and will set an example not just for women athletes, but for women everywhere.
King knew that this was much more than a tennis match. She felt the weight of the women's movement on her shoulders.
On September 20th, 1973, 30,000 fans pile into the Houston Astrodome. More than 90 million people tune in on their TVs.
And the day of the match, the energy was electric.
King makes a splashy entrance, carried onto the court by men clad in togas. Riggs, for his part, arrives on a rickshaw, pulled by beautiful women.
All of it was really rather circus-like. It was a total spectacle. This is something that had just not happened before, and the unpredictability of what was going to happen made it all the more charged.
Finally, the moment King has been waiting for arrives.
The stakes could not have been higher. Everything was on the line for Billie Jean King.
At the outset, King sticks to her strategy of trying to wear down her opponent. But try as she might, Riggs takes an early lead.
I think she had a real moment of vulnerability. I wondered whether or not she was going to pull this off, and whether or not she had made the wrong call. Maybe that she had the wrong strategy.
But as the match unfolds, her tactic bears fruit. Riggs begins to make mistakes.
Riggs started to make some pretty silly shots, and missed shots that he wouldn't have missed. There's no doubt that that gave King a feeling of momentum and a feeling of excitement that she had a chance.
King pulls ahead and wins the first set 6-4.
Huh?
Then, for the next 2 hours, in game after game, dominates her opponent. After 3 sets, Billie Jean King covered.
Nalimitan ako, me. Kaya ako bibigyan naman sa siya.
She wins the Battle of the Sexes.
Crowd went nuts. She threw her racket into the air and had a real moment of triumph.
With millions of fans watching on TVs across the country, it's exactly the outcome King hoped for.
Billie Jean King did what she set out to do. She wanted to make a point, she did it. And I think that in itself is an incredible moment.
In the wake of this crushing defeat, Riggs admits that he underestimated his female opponent. And the two rivals bury the hatchet. King goes on to dominate the professional tennis circuit, winning 39 Grand Slam titles, including 6 at Wimbledon and 4 at the US Open. She even parlays her fame into forming the Women's Tennis Association, an advocacy organization for female players.
As a result of King's work in tennis, tennis has become one of the few sports where men and women are paid equally. That's enormous.
Today, the racket used by Riggs during the famous Battle of the Sexes match is on display at the Bobby Riggs Tennis Museum in Encinitas, California. It recalls the epic face-off that served up equal rights on and off the court. In the heart of central Wisconsin is a majestic rock formation, older than the Himalayas and jutting some 500 feet into the sky. This is the Devil's Tour. Those brave enough to scale these jagged lumps of quartzite are rewarded with panoramic views of the valley below. And just north of these breathtaking boulders is an institution dedicated to the wonders of a man-made sport, the Circus World Museum. Built on the site of the Ringling Brothers Circus former winter base camp, this 64-acre complex is dedicated to preserving the legacy of the greatest show on earth. Among the treasures collected here is a pickup truck, which once trade booth from the early 20th century, and a tiny suit once worn by a performer named Major Mike, billed as the smallest man in the world. But hidden among these eye-catching relics is one that could be easily overlooked.
The artifact is 2.5 inches wide by 12 inches long. It is over 160 years old. On the right-hand side, you'll see imagery of a giraffe, an elephant, a rhinoceros, and a big cat.
This aged circus bill is linked to one of the most bizarre brawls the world has ever known.
This is a story about a brave mayor and a posse of fighting clowns.
It's the mid-1850s. The Canadian city of Toronto is a wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Toronto in the 1850s It was a Wild West pot. It had a disproportionate amount of taverns for the amount of people and the size of the community. It meant that society had ample supplies of alcohol and ample opportunities for conflict to break out. And it did.
Even the local police force and the fire department are seen as part of the problem.
They were notorious for looking the other way. Corruption was in place, and it was a tough town.
But one man thinks he can clean up the chaos. The newly elected mayor, 33-year-old George Allen.
George Allen was ethical, ambitious, and determined to clean up the corruption in his town.
And the mayor is about to get his chance in the most colorful fashion imaginable. On July 12, 1855, trouble brews at a local bar.
This wasn't the average disturbance at a local tavern.
Members of the city fire department are squaring off against an unlikely foe, a troupe of traveling clowns.
The S.B. Howe Star Troupe Menagerie and Circus was in town. The circus clowns had performed for 2 shows that day, and they were at the tavern to blow off a little steam.
But what started as a minor misunderstanding swiftly escalated.
One of the local firefighters knocked the hat off the star performing clown. That clown thought that he was owed an apology. An apology was not given.
And that, an all-out brawl arose. Surprisingly, it's the clowns who come out on top.
It was epic, with the circus performers coming out in the lead. They kicked the firefighters' butts.
When the young mayor hears what's happened, he's appalled.
Mayor Allen had to be frustrated. A fight featuring his fire department.
But the matter isn't over yet. The next day, on Friday the 13th of July, Mayor Allen is called to another disturbance, this time at the circus tent itself. He sends word to the local militia and races to the scene of the crime. When he reaches the fairgrounds, he's met by an extraordinary sight.
The firemen were trying to tip over the circus wagon, trying to tear down the tent, rip it apart. They also threatened to burn down the circus tent.
And that's not all. Members of the police are also present, but instead of intervening, they're simply watching.
The local police department should have been quelling the violence. Instead, they were cheering it on.
Until the militia arrives, the only thing standing in the way of utter carnage is Mayor Allen himself.
All hell was about to break loose in his town.
He was always in control.
Right.
And that's how he just slowly took over our lives.
Your only chance to survive is to leave with us. People magazine investigates cults Sunday make their own choice. Everything is more interesting when you sing it. Even beer names like Three Wolves. Max, music to you now.
Do you have trouble finding the right drill bit for the right job? You've got more drill bits than you care to admit. Well, stop wasting your hard-earned cash and get the one drill bit that does it all. Introducing Does It All drill bits with a distinctive high-fizz yellow flip with just one bit. You can easily drill through ceramics, then tackle solid hardened steel with no problem, then blast right through concrete. It's perfect for plastics and softer metals, even hard rocks like granite or marble are no match for the Does It All drill bits. And after that, Does It All stays razor sharp to make a neat hole in your woodwork. That's just one bit. That's right for almost every job imaginable. The secret is Does It All drill bits with a high-fizz yellow fluid diamond crown and made to last with cobalt, titanium, and tungsten alloy to give you an extremely sharp and hard bearing edge. Does It All cutting tips can stand up to 700 degrees Celsius. That's why Does It All drill bits have a 10-year guarantee. You can easily spend over $500 to get all the bits you need. Order the 16-piece Does It All drill bits set now, and we'll give you the amazing gift of bursting drill bits absolutely free. We'll also offer the super long professional set. Each bit is 200 mils long. Double the length. Order the Pro set today, and you'll get this handy reeling tool and SDS adapter and the super long extension bar, yours free. But hold everything. Order the Pro set now with the losing group. We'll also give you the original 16-piece set. Plus, we'll give you a compact carry bag for free. But we're still not done. If you call and order right now, we'll also give you our big 18mm bit. Call now, and you'll also get the Renovator Benefit 4-piece DIY kit, valued at $100. And it's also yours free, absolutely free. So what are you waiting for? Call now at 0800 999 994. That's 0800 999 994. This offer is not available in stores, so call now.
I don't deserve you.
Said he wants Jordan yesterday. What? My Netflix account.
If something might be hungry.
Are you ready? What property rounds have you created tree lines since? Property Brothers Forever Home. Tuesday night, the own choice. I'm looking for myself. Where is she? What is she doing? Is she okay? It's like a puzzle that there's a piece always missing.
It would mean the absolute world to me to be able to meet my mother and to find out what happened.
It's not actually sorry. It's the most incredible feeling ever.
Lost and found. Saturday, 8:30 on
July 1855 in Toronto. A rather bizarre riot is underway. The local fire squad is brawling with a troupe of traveling circus clowns. Charged with the task of quelling this rumpus is Mayor George Allen. So can Allen control this crowd of rowdy jokers? Allen desperately tries to defuse the situation.
Mayor Allen was brave. He climbed up on the giraffe wagon to address his people. He alone was trying to get people to stop fighting. He tried to gain control.
It's to no avail. The bloodthirsty mob continues to raise hell, but then the mayor's foresight saves the day.
The militia shows up and they stop the violence.
The armed men quell the chaos, and as the dust settles, the scope of the conflict becomes clear. The big top is in tatters.
The circus packed up what remaining equipment had not been destroyed and headed off to the next town.
As a result of the riot, Mayor Allen orders an investigation of the police and fire departments. Both are completely overhauled to root out corruption. The story of the circus riot becomes the stuff of legend.
This story has all the hallmarks of a great movie. It has intrigue, corruption, a riot with clowns and firefighters on Friday the 13th.
Today, an original ad for the 1855 Summer Circus Tour is in the collection of the Circus World Museum in Baraboo, Wisconsin. It acts as a reminder of a one-of-a-kind rumpus and the bold mayor who put a halt to the clowning around. In the heart of Berlin, Germany, is a spectacular mile-long stretch of concrete wall adorned with more than 100 colorful murals. Dubbed the East Side Gallery, these vibrant images are painted on the largest still-standing section of the infamous Berlin Wall. And just a few minutes away is an establishment named for the wall's most notorious crossing point, the Checkpoint Charlie Museum. Visitors to the institution can learn of the extraordinary means by which escapees risked their lives in fleeing from the communist East to the democratic West. Among the items on display is an ultralight airplane that flew over the wall, an inflatable boat used to paddle to freedom, and even a hollowed-out speaker that once hid a human being. But of all the objects on display, one more than any other, illustrates the nature of this historic barrier.
The artifact is made of wood, plastic, and metal. It's 18 inches wide and just under 5 feet long. It's a scaled down version of train tracks and barrier walls.
This scale model of a section of the Berlin Wall barricade recalls an incredible bid to flee communist oppression.
This is a story about a train conductor, a daring escape, and a fight for freedom.
In the aftermath of the Second World War, Europe is split in two.
There was a division between the area occupied by the Soviet Union and the areas occupied by Britain, France, and the United States.
And nowhere is this more apparent than in the city of Berlin. Located in the middle of communist East Germany, one half of the city is a tiny island of freedom in a sea of totalitarian oppression. In 1961, the Soviets begin to erect the Berlin Wall, a 12-foot tall, 28-mile-long barricade through the center of the city. On the democratic western side, life is flourishing.
In the West, you had everything that you would expect from a modern country at that time.
In the communist East, however, residents face extreme poverty, food shortages, and low wages.
You struggled to get your hands on what we would today consider to be quite basic goods.
Among those straining under the cruel yoke of the communist regime is 28-year-old East Berliner Harry Dieterling.
Harry Dieterling was a very loving, very caring man. He was married. He had 4 children.
Dieterling is desperate to move his family to West Berlin and freedom. But crossing the border is fraught with danger.
The East German police were put in place to guard the wall. They were heavily armed. It was their job to prevent anyone from escaping from East Berlin into West Berlin. There were many cases of people being shot as they were trying to leave one side of the city. It was a very, very dangerous time.
But Dieterling refuses to be deterred.
Leaving East Berlin is the only way for a better life.
And Dieterling's job driving passenger trains for the East German Railway offers him a unique view of the obstacle and a chance to break through it. One day, he discovers something extraordinary.
What East Germans had done was seal off those tracks with what was at the time quite flimsy barriers, fences and barbed wire and things like that. But actually, the opportunity did exist to continue straight through those flimsy barriers and break your way, theoretically, into the West.
Dieterling hatches a bold plan. He will load his family and friends onto his train and crash the locomotive straight through the barrier.
He was not just risking his own life, but he was risking the life of his wife, of his small children, of all of his friends and family.
On the night of December 5th, 1961, Dieterling quietly sneaks 24 family members and friends onto the train. He then sets out full steam ahead.
This was Dieterling's one and only chance. If this failed, there was no coming back.
Welcome to the Q2. This means a lot to a lot of people. It's been a mammoth restoration job. I've had to modernize it. Live life royalty inside the QE2 Hotel. Stand to make 17 on choice.
Fish, and more fish. Can you see yourself catching fish? Catching more fish? Then see yourself with a new fish seeker. Spending time with family and friends, catching plenty of big fish all year round from the safety of the shore. The fish seeker is a lightweight, portable, self-propelled watercraft that can carry as many as 5 boats up to 1,000 meters offshore. Right to it, a big fish hunt. The secret to catching plenty of big fish is in fish seeker's sleek, low-pacing technology and twin jet thrusters that cut through surf, wind and breakers, and with its built-in compass, it never loses sight of the course you see. To start catching fish, simply attach the fish seeker to your rod, reel, or hand line and send it out past the breakers. The fish seeker automatically releases your baited box. Then simply wait 20 minutes or so before you haul the line. Fishing's never been so easy. Try to cast your line out past the breakers, and sometimes it next to impossible. And folks and beats. But for a sticker keeps you on the safety of the shore. It gets you past the breakers to catch the big fish. The haul in the line and add up the pay you can get. Just one morning's catch with a fish sticker can add up to hundreds of dollars in prime perks from the store. It's easy to see that the fish sticker could pay for itself in almost no time at all. You can even operate the fish sticker from your mobile device with just a single touch. You can open and close the weight hatch, set the runtime, and launch the fish sticker in the direction you decide. You could pay up to $5,000 for an electric martini, but you won't pay anything like that because here today we've worked out a very special offer with the viewers. You can get your very own fish sticker, guaranteed to catch you plenty of fish. Plus, if you call right now, we'll give you a second battery, absolutely free. So what are you waiting for? Call now at 0800-999-994. That's 0800-999-994. This offer is not available in stores, so call now.
Play your way. Because you know that I shouldn't be here. Yes, here I am. From the steely streets of Asia, 1952. Tropical heat, possible to grow. Yes, here I am. Bold and refreshing. Uncage your tiger.
You think I wake you? Marty Tony. No.
It's the last place you would expect anything. Some other things I can do. Murder in the heartlands got something on pity on choice.
Take a night for yourself. Kick your shoes off and get ready to feel restored.
Restoring such is difficult. You will learn something new every single day.
3 of the best back to back.
Well, what's this thing? It's amazing.
Renew, reinvent, and repurpose. Make yourself feel new again with Restoration Fridays. Friday from 7:30 on Choice.
It's December 5th, 1961 in East Berlin. A railroad engineer named Harry Dieterlen is about to make the journey of his life. He means to smash his train through the Berlin Wall and find freedom in the West. It's a bold plan, but will it work? As Dieterling's train approaches its final scheduled stop, instead of slowing, he accelerates towards the barrier separating East from West.
He must have had adrenaline coursing through his veins, a mixture of fear, of terror, of anticipation.
The border guards are helpless as the train barrels down the tracks. Dieterling's train hurtles into the barrier and crashes safely through to the western side.
Dieterling must have felt, in that moment, I imagine, euphoric that he managed to pull this off really completely unscathed.
Not surprisingly, the very next day, the barricade is sealed, and Dieterling's ambitious bid for freedom makes international headlines.
This escape was so brave and was so dramatic in its details and its content that it actually became a worldwide news story. And really, he was held up as something of a hero at the time.
Dieterling and his family start a new life in West Germany. The Berlin Wall remains in place for nearly 3 decades until it comes down in 1989. Today, this model of a train track and barrier is on display at the Checkpoint Charlie Museum in Berlin, Germany. It illustrates the brave railmen who broke through to freedom. Located in the Florida Keys, the town of Isla Morada boasts the country's only living coral barrier reef. Divers can admire the 500 or so species of fish that reside in these waters and swim beside a sunken 1960s freighter named the Eagle. And one area institution celebrates this world beneath the waves, the History of Diving Museum. The collection includes the first underwater metal detector invented in the 1950s, an oxygen supplying device known as a rebreather used in marine cave explorations, and a specialized suit capable of protecting divers at depths of nearly 1,000 feet. But none of these sub-nautical marvels would exist if not for one peculiar piece.
The artifact is expertly cast and soldered into copper plates and shaped into a dome. Its surface is covered with glass, rivets, and metal bars. There are a pair of ports in the back, and one can connect to a long rubber hose.
This item recalls a disaster on land that shaped the future of undersea exploration.
This is the story of a sailor, a suit of armor, and an invention that changed the world.
It's the 1820s on the east coast of England. After several years at sea as a merchant sailor, 21-year-old John Dean has returned home to the town of Whitstable.
John Dean was brave, bold, and he had become fearless.
Yet the young sailor is about to find that his biggest challenge won't take place at sea, but right next door. One day, Dean is at home when he sees plumes of smoke and fire billowing from his neighbor's farm.
Dean did not hesitate to act. He rushed out of his own house and he went to his neighbors to see what he could do to help.
When he gets there, he finds his neighbor in panic. The family's prized horses are trapped inside the burning barn. Reaching them seems impossible.
The smoke was too thick to even breathe in space.
It's too dangerous to risk going in, so Dean tries to extinguish the fire using pails of water from a nearby pond. But his efforts are in vain. Then, just as all seems lost, the fire brigade arrives with the equipment needed to fight the blaze.
They arrived with a hose and a pump, and this seemed to be a solution that would probably work.
They spray the barn down, but the smoke only grows. Time is running out for the trapped horses. So Dean frantically searches for anything that might help. Then, he sees something that gives him an idea. In the doorway of the farmer's home stands a medieval suit of armor.
He reached up, took the helmet off the armor, tucked it beneath his arm, and rushed outside. What Dean does next will not only save the day, but echo through the ages.
Dick and Angel are back with new dreamers on board.
It is a dream to do this.
The new season, escape to the Chateau DIY, Friday, 9:30 on Choice.
The new series, Deadliest Catch, Dungeon Cove. Wednesday, 7:30 on Choice. George Clark has seen amazing places. The canvas in the interior of the house. But this season will leave him speechless. It's incredible. George Clark's Amazing Spaces starts May 14th on Choice.
I don't know who to go to for what.
Building a house is a really tough challenge. You've got absolutely no thing design. It can destroy you. It can really push you to the edge. Oh, what?
Two Christian relatives help 6 self-proclaimed this anything. Wow, it's so delivers, and that's what's it about good design. It's special, interesting design architecture. New House the 100K built Tuesday, 7:30 on Choice. There's no way to blame ourselves. It'll take all of us to do this. Everybody feels like this is for fun. Never mind, I said what.
The day gods have risen.
You'll make my decision when I'm my next year.
We're in it because we are driven. It's in our blood. It's the way that we all work together and succeed together.
Jay Fever, Saturday, 7:30 on Choice.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to serve you food. Let's get rolling.
This is our game, and we're gonna win this competition.
We'll be battling for $100,000.
Basically, investment. We're going to take that money.
It's waiting a road trip for a new city, but you sell like crazy.
We need to sell out today.
This is offering 10 already. A great food truck race. Starts May 10 on Choice.
I'm looking for my son.
Where is she? What is she? Is she okay? It's like a puzzle that there's a piece always missing.
It would mean the absolute world to me to be able to meet my mother and to find out what happened.
So if you walk down here, it's your family.
Oh my God, it's not actually so it's the most incredible feeling ever.
Those would be nice. Lost and found. Saturday, 8:30 on Choice.
These what you're looking for.
It's time to stock up. Drew into your off to enjoy La Dolce Vita. All new Salvage Hunters, weekends, 6:30 on Choice.
Ever since I was born, I was obsessed with speed. Always wanted to be the fastest. Always wanted to be the best. But now, I scream for it. I'm going to miss it. Because this is what I was born. Join me, Idris Elba, as I take on some of the world's toughest moments. This is no acting. Idris Elba, No Limits, starts May 19 on Choice.
It's the 1820s in England. A fire has broken out at a remote farmhouse. The stables are filled with smoke, and the horses are in peril. But a young man named John Dean is about to save the day and change the course of history in the process. Dean tells the fire brigade that he wants to attach one of their water hoses to the inside of the medieval helmet. But rather than pumping water through the hose, he asks the fire brigade to pump in air.
By using the hose from air into the helmet, it would be providing him with fresh air in this haze of smoke.
Dean puts this improvised apparatus on his head and bravely enters the burning barn.
Even as smoke filtered around him, the fresh air from the pump was coming up into that helmet, and he found he was able to breathe.
One by one, he leads the terrified horses to safety.
As Dean staggered out of his stable, he was met with the praise of all of his neighbors for his act of heroism.
But the story doesn't end there. After the ordeal, Dean can't help but think of his days as a sailor and wonders if his breathing contraption could be useful at sea.
Dean's fire rescue whet his appetite and inspired him in new ways to use his invention.
Dean eventually constructs a new version of his makeshift invention. He molds a helmet made of copper. In place of narrow eye slits, he installs glass windows. Then he affixes two nozzles on the back, where hoses can be connected to pump air in and out. When he's finished, he has the world's first underwater diving helmet.
Dean's invention became the prototype for the iconic diving helmet that we know today.
John Dean's design serves as a standard for divers for the next 150 years and is the clear precursor to the devices used today.
And this replica of his original diving helmet sits on display at the History of Diving Museum in Isla Mirada, Florida. It recalls the blaze-battling sailor whose clever innovation opened up a new frontier. A navigational antenna from the 1940s, a host of military vehicles that span the 20th century, and a preserved nuclear bunker built during the Cold War are just a few of the highlights at the Info Age Science History Museum and Learning Center in Wall, New Jersey. But among these examples of wartime technology is one item that's found its place in everyday life.
The artifact is 7 inches long by 8.5 inches high. It consists of a wooden box with wires coming out of it. It has metal and glass, tubes, knobs, and switches. This item is almost 100 years old.
This 1920s radio was at the center of one man's ambitious idea to change the way the world sounds.
This is a story about innovation, inspiration, and invention.
It's 1921. It's a new era of convenience and revolutionary technology for American consumers. From coast to coast, companies cash in with appliances like refrigerators, toasters, and dishwashers. One man looking to get in on the action is a 30-year-old businessman named David Sarnoff.
David Sarnoff was a visionary. He was tenacious. He was bold. He was an innovator, and he was a self-starter.
Sarnoff works for a company called the Radio Corporation of America, better known today as RCA. He thinks RCA can profit by rebranding a piece of military equipment for in-home use, the radio.
Up to this point, it had only been used for two-way communication.
The radio had been used during World War I to relay information to planes, ships, and bases. But with the conflict long over, there aren't too many applications for the technology.
The radio had been a wartime tool, but after the war, nobody knew what to do with it.
Sarnoff has an inkling that this device could be repurposed to offer regular Americans news, music, and other entertainment.
Sarnoff thinks radio can be like libraries, a place where people would come and get timely information.
He presents his idea to RCA executives, but his bosses aren't on board.
When RCA heard Sarnoff's idea, they were skeptical.
The company won't back the proposal because there's nothing for the public to listen to. No content exists. But that doesn't stop the bold businessman.
Sarnoff was determined. He was certain radio had a future. He needed to find a way to get the public interested in buying radios.
So how will Sarnoff tune America into radio?
Why would we call over money to take money? It's not the smartest business move. I don't think that is our choice. We're meant to be here. We're meant to be doing this.
Everybody on that site is basically family. Never mind a share of what it could. Let's go find the real deal.
This is Brian, boys. Coming in hot. It's not a nice being able to let things fail.
Not good.
Just go. I'm not walking unless it's on my terms. It's not even a little bit close to my terms yet.
Boys and Back with a brand new season featuring Big Dreamcast. All new Wheeler Dealers, weeknight 6:30 on Choice.
Bring your favorite sweets. Incredible. Right to your kitchen. Every day at 4:30.
It's like a giant hug.
That is
Wow.
Amazing.
Absolutely brilliant. Fresh ideas every day.
There we go.
Yes, 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 yes.
Cool out every day. 4:30 on Choice.
The new series, Deadliest Catch, Dungeon Cove. Wednesday, 7:30 on Choice.
You can have your dream home in your dream location, but you're going to have to get your hands on it. You get that right?
Yeah.
Charlie Luxton helps potential homeowners create a new size of paradise.
It's beautiful. It's like a real house.
The layout works. It's perfect.
It's like a work of art.
Just love it.
All new Building the Dream. Tuesday at 8:30 on Choice.
It's like some corner of paradise.
Dick and Angel are back with new dreamers on board.
It is a dream to do this.
The new season, Escape to the Chateau DIY, Friday, 9:30 on Choice.
This has to be one of the most exciting places on earth.
Join these new kids in a remarkable series
Let's take you on the ultimate adventure.
across the Greek islands. Uncover Greece as you've never seen it before.
When you come here, you are living as the ancient state. This is the most magical place.
Greek on an Odyssey with Disney Hughes. Monday, 8:30 on Choice.
Ever since I was a boy, I was obsessed with speed. Always wanted to be the fastest. Always wanted to be the best. I screwed up. I'm going to risk it. Because this is what I was going to. Join me, Idris Elba, as I take on some of the world's toughest moments. This is no acting. I'm Idris Elba, known for this, steps at 19 on Choice.
It's the 1920s in New York City. Businessman David Sarnoff has an idea he believes could change history. He thinks that an obscure piece of World War I military equipment could find a new lease on life in American homes. Its name? The radio. But how will he convince a skeptical public that this machine will make waves across the country? David Sarnoff is trying to develop an audience for the radio when, in the spring of 1921, he hears about an upcoming boxing match between Jack Dempsey and George Carpentier. Set to take place just outside of New York City, the bout has the whole country buzzing. Jack Dempsey was the heavyweight champion of the world, and he was defending his title against challenger George Carpentier. It was billed as the fight of the century. When tickets for the match go on sale, all 90,000 sell out, and this gives Sarnoff a brilliant idea. Sarnoff believed the fight of the century was a match made in heaven. The newspapers were writing about it every day. The public wanted to hear about it. Sarnoff realizes that there are countless people who don't want to miss out on the action. So he comes up with a plan to broadcast the fight over the radio. He'll offer people the chance to hear the match at listening locations along the East Coast. If it works, he just might be able to prove radio's potential to his skeptical bosses at RCA. Sarnoff knew this was his big chance, and he wasn't going to go down without a fight. In the days before the match, Sarnoff sets up a broadcast transmitter inside the boxing venue. Then, he distributes radios to bar and theater owners all over the East Coast, and they help publicize the broadcast. Lastly, Sarnoff hires an announcer to narrate the event for the listening audience. On July 2nd, 1921, the fight between Dempsey and Carpentier begins. Sarnoff listens as the presenter gives a thrilling play-by-play of the entire fight. But he can only wonder how many people are actually tuned in. There was was no way to measure audiences like there is today. But in the days after the fight, something remarkable happens. Letters from listeners poured to RCA demanding more sporting events be carried. It's estimated that 300,000 people listened to Sarnoff's broadcast. It's just the news Sarnoff has been waiting for. His stunt proves to RCA and the American public that radio is the wave of the future. This was a game changer for the radio industry. Sales took off. Everyone wanted radio in their living room. Sarnoff must have felt elated. The company begins manufacturing radios for home use and launches a radio network to fill the airtime. David Sarnoff goes on to become president of RCA and pioneers another revolutionary technology: television. Sarnoff's name is part of broadcasting history. He's included in the list of one of the greatest 20th century American businessmen. Today, this early model RCA radio remains in the collection of the InfoAge Science History Museum and Learning Center in Wall, New Jersey. It's a lasting reminder of how one man got America riding the wave of radio. New Haven, Connecticut. In the 1920s, on the elegant grounds of Yale University, one of America's favorite pastimes was conceived. Students would take breaks from studying by tossing around empty pie tins, manufactured by a local pie company called Frisbee. And what started as a campus craze eventually turned into a popular sport that's still played today. But a more intellectual pursuit can be found at the university's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. Here, visitors can see some of the earliest illustrated tales of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, astrological star charts made by English astrologers in the 1500s, and stunning pictures of rare birds drawn in the 1830s by the famed ornithologist John James Audubon. And among these antique works is an elaborate tome that many regard as the most important book in the world.
The item is about 15 inches long and is over 550 years old. It is comprised of 1,282 pages bound between two leather covers.
This ancient book marked a historic first, but few know the incredible story of its origins.
This is the story of one man who changed the world one page at a time.
Following the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century, Western Europe entered a period known as the Dark Ages. As the memory of Roman civilization faded, the tribes of Northern Europe descended into barbarity. Practically the only sources of written culture are religious texts, painstakingly transcribed by monks.
Books took a very long time to write. They were created by scribes writing by hand.
As a result, books are extremely expensive and only accessible to scholars and the wealthy elite.
Books were very rare in this period. They were not something that were common for most people.
But in the late 1440s in Germany, a man comes along who changes everything. Inventor Johannes Gutenberg.
Gutenberg seems to have been extremely imaginative. He thought of new business ideas pretty much continually.
Gutenberg sees a money-making opportunity in books. The question is how to make more of them cheaper and faster. So he imagines a machine that won't rely on handwriting at all. A printing press.
Gutenberg had to figure out a way to bring letters together on the printed page in the way that a scribe would do in writing. He really wanted to create something that was just phenomenal, that had never been seen.
Gutenberg conceives of a contraption that will hold the letters of the alphabet carved onto tiny pieces of metal. He builds a frame for the machine and then creates blocks of letters that can be arranged to form any word and reused over and over again.
So a page of text would be built up letter by letter, line by line.
When finished printing multiple copies of one page, an operator can simply rearrange the letters and print the next. To serve this pressing apparatus, Gutenberg adapts an existing tool.
Gutenberg's press seems to have been based on a wine screw that would be used for pressing grapes and making wine.
With the machine assembled, he gives it a test run. He lays a page of block text and coats it with ink. Then he presses it against a sheet of parchment. But when Gutenberg holds up the result splotch of blotches and smudges. So how will he fix his invention and rewrite history?
It's the 15th century in Germany. Johannes Gutenberg has just invented a revolutionary contraption, the printing press. When he tests it out, the results are a mess. So how will Gutenberg fix his device and rewrite history?
When Gutenberg takes a closer look at the test page, he realizes the problem isn't with the press, but with the ink.
Ink that scribes used was water-based, and it essentially dyed the material that it was touching.
This ink is fine for hand lettering, but too runny for Gutenberg's printing press. To make his machine work, he must create a whole new formula.
Gutenberg needed an oil-based ink that would accrue to the page.
Gutenberg tests various new inks before finally settling on a mixture of ingredients that just might work.
It was a combination of linseed oil and carbon taken from burning substances. It had a glossy sheen and was an entirely new composition.
Gutenberg applies his new ink to the letters, laying down a sheet of paper, and lowers the press. To his delight, when he raises it, he has a perfectly printed sheet.
The culmination of Gutenberg's work was the creation of a mechanical printing press that could produce text repeatedly without relying on the work of individual scribes.
Gutenberg decides that his first major project will be to copy one of the most highly sought-after texts in the world, the Holy Bible.
The Bible would be a showpiece. It would be something spectacular that would be guaranteed to sell.
In 1455, he prints about 180 copies of the Latin Bible. They sell immediately and begin a new era for the printed word.
Within decades, print was a common technology across Europe.
Suddenly, a brand new world opens up. Because books are cheaper, more people learn to read, and this jumpstarts a cultural revolution.
In inventing the printing press, Gutenberg made the way to reach a much broader audience. We're still living in the world that Gutenberg created.
Today, this Gutenberg Bible, one of only 49 copies known to exist, is on display at the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library in New Haven, Connecticut. It recalls how one inventive man imprinted his name into the annals of history. From a circus brawl to a train trip to freedom, an underwater invention to the Battle of the Sexes.
I'm Don Wildman, and these are the mysteries at the museum.
Everyone for Tom Collins! Being out here on the pier, surrounded by water, I go back to being kids fishing. Remember we go fishing? How much joy does that bring? Mate, we know I've got some good news, by the way. One of the fishermen caught a lovely big sea bass on one of my dishes today. So a proper South End sea bass. Lovely. At the end of South End Pier, we're serving up a menu bubbling over with delicious feasts. And adding some true Tinseltown glamour is the star of Thelma and Louise, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Dead Man Walking. It's Susan Sarandon, everyone! Welcome! How's it going? Such a pleasure to see you.
Nice to meet
We
you.
are so excited to have you on the end of our pier.
Thank you. I've never been here before.
I think we should just take a moment. We have got an Oscar award-winning actress in our South End cast. You've been into, what is it, over 80 films?
Yeah, if you last long enough, then you become an icon. That's what happens. I've been in the business since the 70s.
Everything from Rocky Horror, Thelma and Louise, one of my favourites, Which is Least Favorite, which I find it hard to eat cherries now. I mean, that seems incredible.
Like, some of them you wouldn't want to see.
Right.
Maybe necessarily. They don't work as well as other ones.
Yeah.
I'm still having fun, so I think I'll just keep doing it.
Yeah. What have you been doing recently in the UK?
I did Blackbird last fall and had the most exquisite time. It was so beautiful. So many little pubs that were incredible. Well, I didn't understand pubs. I thought it was just like footballers all, drunken in a pub. But all the food seemed so fresh that I just gained 10 pounds. Even though I was playing someone who was dying and I was kind of like, well, I'm dying. I might as well try that super pudding. Oh, I might as well. And at the very end of the film, we wrapped on Thanksgiving, and they made an incredible Thanksgiving spread for the Americans. Wow. And the club that had everything, had the pumpkin pie, the dressing, it was just fabulous.
How people looked after you? They did take care of you.
Oh, they were great.
One thing that really stands out for me is that you can't really categorize the parts you play.
No, because I'm a character actor. That's how I've lasted so long.
So varied.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy getting under the skin of the character? Do you really enjoy that aspect of it?
It's like enforced compassion. You get a chance to live so many lives, and you end up understanding that we're all pretty similar, really. We all are afraid of the same thing. That really makes you live a life of gratitude, which is probably what leads into activism, because you empathize, and it's pretty hard not to be active.
I love that side about you, and correct me if I'm wrong. You were arrested on a march.
Yeah, I was arrested. It was about the separation of families taking kids from their mothers. Yeah.
And you've always stood up very clearly for certain things that meant a lot to you.
I was in school, during the early 70s, and so you could see what was happening when they were trying to integrate the South. You could see what was happening in Vietnam. And so if you were young and had half a brain, you were active.
And you've never been afraid to do that.
Well, I might have been afraid, but I kind of was more worried about living with myself if I was
comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction.
Well, I think you've been consistent. I mean, how have you balanced family? You've got 3 kids and filming and things like Thanksgiving and those special occasions. How do you do that?
Well, of course, you never really feel like you're giving anything the proper attention. I tried not to work during the school year when they were little.
Yeah.
And then, of course, by the time they were teenagers, they were begging me to leave, so that changed. But there were a number of times when I was chopping up stuff into my trailer, and then when we did Bull Durham, we moved Thanksgiving to the day off. People all came to my house, and we pre-recorded the Thanksgiving Day Parade and played that.
And your Thanksgiving is like our Christmas Day. I mean, is it a big family occasion, lots of people?
Yes. We've had as many as 20 people.
Okay,
sometimes, depending if there's like one time Ray Fiennes was there because he was a loose person that I was working with Sienna Miller.
Wasting shows.
And then we put 2 tables together.
All the chairs, all the lights, all that kind of stuff. You were one of 9, right?
I'm the eldest of 9.
I saw that game a little bit. I think you've already started. You got 5, so
you have 5 kids.
Yeah.
What's the age?
17 to 3. So
you're still in the tunnel.
Yeah, we are definitely in the tunnel. So in the tunnel, you've got me down. You did the American version of Who You Think You Are, where they traced your family.
Yeah, they found that I was Welsh on my father's side. Really? But then the really fun one was the Italian side, and that branch of my family is Sicilian mostly.
Being a little bit Sicilian yourself, then, this dish that I'm going to cook up now is inspired by Sicily. You feeling hungry?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. Down at the other end of the pier, I've got a dish that will make Susan fall in love with her Italian heritage. I have got the most incredible crowd pleaser of a dish. This is Sicilian inspired. Chicken thighs, wrapped in sweet potato, prosciutto, and we cook it above the most delicious potatoes with tomatoes. And it all starts here with some lovely sliced potato. Kilo and a half peeled and sliced about a centimetre thick, about 5 or 6 minutes of parboiling. And then the next job is to peel